I'm going to show you how to make this in Procreate with my alcohol ink brush set. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to get your palette that comes with it. So you'll tap that top right circle and then hit the bottom right palettes, and then go and get the alcohol ink color palette. And once you have found it, you'll then hit set default. Tap the circle in the top right and then go to disk, and now your color palette is available to work on. Tap the brush and open up your alcohol ink expansion or the other stamp pack and pick a stamp that you like and place it where you think it looks best. You can also move it around by tapping the arrow and moving it around that way. Now press your layers and press the plus sign to add a new layer, and then go back into your brushes and pick out the next texture that you would like to see. And then you can tap the arrow and move that around to the spot that you like it. You're going to keep doing this, going into your layers, pressing the plus sign and picking a new texture and placing those where you think they look best. I'm going to pick out a few more, and so I'll just show you where I put them, and then I'm also just erasing the parts that overlap, that are majorly overlapping. We're going to do more of that in a little bit. Okay, so I almost have all of the textures that I want put down. Our next step is going to be cleaning all of this up. So we're going to go into one of the layers. We'll just start with the edge. And what you can do is you can either erase all the way up to the next texture, or you can tap the finger and go into the fill and blend, which is in the top part of your alcohol ink, and then you can just blend the edges. So I kind of do a mixture of both. And when you're using the blender brush, the harder you press, the kind of like the larger the area it blends. And when you do like really light, it's really defined. Okay, so now I'm just going to go around, and on each layer I'm going to erase the parts that are overlapping, and I'm going to blend the parts so that you can't really see the edges that I've erased, and I'll just continue doing that on every single layer. Once you've done this on every layer, you can then go into your layers, swipe them all towards the right, and then hit group, and then toggle down, and you can tap it and hit flatten, and then we're going to create a new layer by pressing that plus sign above it. You can see on some of the textures that I already have alcohol ink splatter, but I'm going to show you how you can make that with the brushes that you have. So go into your brushes, and you're going to go into the alcohol ink, and then you're going to tap bubbles alcohol drops. Now this one, you want the color to be as light as possible, so you can use the color picker. In between those two toggles, you'll see a little square. You can tap that and highlight one of the colors that you're going to be going over. So we'll pick this one, so we'll kind of put those down, and you can see the ones that I've put down. Now to change this, we can tap on the magic wand and hit hue, saturation, brightness, and hit layer. This is going to be in Procreate 5. And then you can move around the toggles to kind of get it lighter, or maybe pull in a bit more saturation. Next, I'll show you how to use the bubble alcohol drops. So this one, you're going to want a darker color. So we'll go and tap that little square in between the size and the opacity gliders. So we'll select a color, and then we'll go tap the circle in the top right, and then you can see where I'm playing around with the sliders where it's HSB, so S is saturation, B is brightness, and so you can play around with how dark you want it, and then the more you tap it, the brighter it's going to get in the center, but the edges stay really dark. So you can see on the right, my natural alcohol inks that were already part of the texture, how they have that really dark outline, but it's really light in the middle, and so you can just play around with that. So notice how there's bigger splashes and smaller splashes, so you want to kind of recreate that with these little dots that you're going to be putting, so you can change the size as you put them down, or you could even, some of these look a little elongated, so just play around with the sizes and the shapes to really get a realistic look for the alcohol ink splashes that you would get by putting down the alcohol ink, and then after it's a bit dried, kind of like spraying it with splashes. So that's that effect. So I'm just going to kind of show you my process with this. Sometimes I go and I turn the opacity down, which you can do by tapping the layer and then pulling the opacity glider down. So I'm just going to play around with the colors, play around with the sizes that I want to put down. So I'm just going to go through this. And if you saw in my brush pack, the alcohol bubbles 2, I can't remember the exact name. I don't think I have that in my latest set because I played with that after my latest release. So if you want that, just DM me on Instagram and I can send it over to you. So make a new layer by tapping the plus sign, then tap that layer and hit clipping mask. And now we're going to work on colors. All right, now go into your brushes, go to the alcohol ink and get your fill and blend brush. And now you're going to tap the square in between the gliders to pick up a color, and then you're going to make it darker. So you can see that the color I'm putting down is a lot darker than the one below it, and it really, really brings out those lines. And so that's what we're going to kind of focus on doing. What's very important about this is that we create new layers for every color that we do. So tap the layer, and then you're going to hit clipping mask, and you're going to do this for every single color that you put on so that you can change them very easily. You also don't have to do the color picker. You can just pick whatever color you want. So I'll just pick pink, and I will go in and get my fill and blend brush. And in this empty clipping mask layer, I'm now just going to put it over top. And it actually ended up looking really cool. Now we already have fill and blend selected in our blender, so tap the finger, and then that way you can go and really blend that color. Now it's important that you kind of make the colors meld a little bit, because when you're putting down alcohol ink, the colors tend to kind of like mix up a little bit. And again, if you want to play with the colors, just tap the magic wand, hit hue, saturation, brightness, and layers, and then you can move around the hue. So you could make it like any color you wanted. You can play around with the hue. So you can see it moving around to purples, blues, greens. You can make whatever your color you really want. Okay, so I'm going to continue making new layers as a clipping mask and adding more color. And obviously playing around with what I want it to look like. So with the hue, saturation, brightness. Once I'm done really getting the colors that I want, we'll be able to move on to the next step. But for the next little bit, I'm just going to be really playing around with how I want the colors to look. And then I'm going to show you something in a second that changes the entire look of the whole art. It's really, really fun to play with this new feature in Procreate 5. So if you don't have Procreate 5, get it, because this new feature is really cool. Okay, so I've got everything the way that I want it. So this is my finished project for color, but I'm going to show you how to change the color if you're just not loving the way it looks. Okay, so first what we need to do when we are pretty sure we're done with our colors, we're going to tap them and slide them all over to the right, hit group, and then toggle it down, tap it, hit flatten, and then tap it one more time and hit clipping mask. Okay, now you're going to go back to that layer, the color layer, tap it, and then hit merge down. Slide it over to the left, and we're going to hit duplicate, because if we end up totally messing this up, we still have the original. So turn off the bottom by tapping that check mark. All right, tapping the magic wand, we're going to hit gradient map and then hit layer. And this is where it gets really fun, because you can change the complete look of what you're doing based on what you choose. And then you can play around with the sliders and like pull in. So this one is blaze. You can pull in more purple or pull in more orange or pull in more of the black. Like, it's really cool, the things that you can do with the gradient map. And so you can just kind of go through each one and see how it looks and toggle around with the colors. And you can create some really, really cool looks with that. Okay, I'm going to keep the colors that I had though. So I'm going to swipe this to the left, hit delete, and then toggle that back on. And I'm going to show you guys on Instagram the alcohol ink hashtag. And I'm going to show you some of the real alcohol ink and where their gold ends up. So you can see how it sometimes really clusters, and then sometimes it does these really pretty thin lines of gold with the splatters. And so that's what we're trying to recreate, is how it reacts in real life. So we're going to go back into Procreate, tap our brushes, And then we're going to open up the alcohol ink brush pack with the brushes in it, not the stamps, and go for thick and thin gold lines. For the gold splotches, that one works too, and you can totally use this one. But I tend to always stick with the thick and thin lines. I don't know, there's just something about the texture that I really like about it. So one thing that I noticed, and I'm going to show you back this picture again, is that the alcohol ink is very inconsistent in how thick and thin it is. So you don't want to keep it consistent. You don't want to keep it like all one thick line or all one thin line. You want to kind of space it out. And the way you get that with this brush, pushing really hard is going to make those big blotches basically. And then the lighter you press, it'll make those really, really thin lines. So you want to really mix up how you lay it down, and you want to really follow where it's darkest on the alcohol ink, because when you're doing it in real life and the alcohol ink's drying and the gold is drying, it's going to be really concentrating in those same areas where the lines are the thickest. So I make really thin gold lines on those thinner lines, and I really concentrate it where the lines are really dark. All right, so I know it looks like I kind of like sped through that, but it's really boring just watching me put it down. So just make sure that you're changing up the thin and the thickness of the line and concentrating where the lines are the darkest, and you'll really get the appearance of that real gold being put down. Now also you notice that when that gold dried, it doesn't just dry in lines, it also has the like gold flecks, the gold, almost like a splatter. It isn't splatter, but that's what I called the brush. So go into your brush pack, and then you're going to select small gold splatter. And we're going to still put this down in black. So everything that we're putting down is going to be in black. So I'll show you that one we were looking at one more time. You can see how it kind of is all around the lines. So that's what I tend to do, is I tend to put that around where the lines dry, where they would have dried in real life. But you can put them wherever, because it will look really good once the gold goes over top of it. All right, now go into your layers, make a new layer above, go into your brushes and get for thick gold splatter. And this is just going to kind of be for like the bigger chunks of gold flecks that dried. And I just kind of follow where I put the splatter. Now we're going to go and we're going to put a new layer by pressing the plus sign above each of these. So above the lines, above the splatter, and above the flecks. You're going to make each of these into a clipping mask. So tap it and hit clipping mask. And you're going to do that for each layer that you've made above the lines, the splatter, and the flecks. And then if it makes it easier for you, you can then put them into groups. All right, again, the way to group is to slide them towards the right, hit group, and then kind of toggle it down to get out of the way. And you're going to do that for all three of these, the lines, the splatter, and the flecks. And then what we're going to do is, just to make it easier, we're going to turn off the flecks and the splatter by tapping the check marks, basically, to turn them off or to hide them. All right, once you've turned them off, we're going to go into that bottom layer, the lines layer, and we're going to go into the clipping mask portion, and we're going to go to the palettes and get the other palette that came with it, the alcohol ink gold. Set that to default. And then you're going to just pick one of the colors that you like. All right, now go into your brushes, and you're going to get the gold overlay. And I'm going to show you really up close. While I'm going over it, you can see it going over top of just the black. And you can see if I go over it a couple times, it gets lighter. So I like doing that. Sometimes I like to just go over it once, and then sometimes I like to go over it a couple times. Okay, so close that group by tapping that arrow, and then tap the middle layer arrow. And we're going to toggle them back on by pressing that square, so check mark. And then go down to the clipping mask layer, and now we're going to do the same thing that we did with the lines, and we're going to use the same color that we had, and we're just going to go over the gold. Avoid moving in too straight of a line, or you'll start to see those lines pop up. So try kind of moving erratically. Okay, so same thing, we're going to go into our layers, we're going to close that layer, we're going to open the other one and go into the clipping mask, and if you hadn't already, just tap the little check mark. And then we're going to go over top the same way that we did the lines and the gold splatter. All right, we're done this part, so we're going to flatten this. So we're going to go into our layers. We're going to close that group. We're going to swipe them to the right, tap group, toggle it down, tap it, and hit flatten. If you're not loving the color that you picked, the easiest thing is to go tap your magic wand, hit hue, saturation, and brightness, hit layer, and then you can toggle them around on the bottom. So hue, saturation, brightness, just play around with those, and I'll show you up close kind of the different looks that you can get when you move them around. So you can make it lighter, or you can completely change the color. You can make it whatever color you want, but I tend to stay within like gold, rose gold colors. All right, you're done, but I'm going to show you a few more of the brushes and things you can do. In the alcohol palette, just pick a color. Go into your alcohol ink brushes and hit the alcohol ink bumpy edge. It may seem like it doesn't do a whole lot, but we'll go into our layers, we'll make a new layer, and then we're going to just erratically draw. There's no rhyme or reason to the way that it needs to look, just how you think it should look. Once you have it down the way you want it, go into your layers, hit the plus sign to make a new layer, and then you're going to go and make it a clipping mask. So tap it, clipping mask, then go into your brushes and go into one of the stamp, whether that be the alcohol ink stamps or the alcohol ink expansion. Just pick a texture that you like, and then you're going to stamp it over top. And so basically you can create any shape that you want with the textures that I have. There's 3 different brushes, so pick which one you like the best. So I'm going to show you how to make a leaf. So you would do the same process, just draw it out, and then you'll make a layer above it and make it into a clipping mask. Go get a texture that you like. I really love this line, Alcohol Ink Stamp 5 in the extension pack, because it looks so pretty for leaves. So you can make any shape you want with those brushes. I did make some roses and leaves already that are you can just stamp right away with those ones that were made with alcohol ink, but you can make whatever shapes you want. So thank you so much if you have already purchased my alcohol ink brush set. I hope that this tutorial was helpful for you, and if you don't already have it, I will create a link in the bottom.